I hope you can hear this. This is procession music. It is in Zimbabwe. And this is the site of where Bernard Mizeki was martyred. I wish you could see it. Deacons. I emailed Mark Vancouver, who had been a bishop in Zimbabwe, who actually appears in one of these videos, and he's now in Lexington, Kentucky. And he said this: I attended the annual pilgrimage in Zimbabwe where 10,000 Anglicans would gather, camping without tents, fires to keep warm, singing choruses all night. In the morning, we would celebrate with high mass with a procession that included hundreds of clergy and dozens of bishops. The night was traditional African music, the morning high church Anglican. It was powerful. One night, I remembered praying for folks for many hours. I was feeling tired, but when I looked up and saw a line of 200 waiting for prayer, I kept going until dawn. May such spiritual hunger continue to grow in the hearts of our people. I say all of that because when you think about the martyrdom of someone who actually is one of the most pivotal heroes in the history of South African Christianity, the tendency is to grieve loss. Because it's awful at one level. A little bit of his story: Mizeki actually was originally escaped at the age of 12 from grinding poverty, made his way all the way down to South Africa, and he wound up being, in essence, a day laborer as a teenager in Johannesburg, in one of the worst parts of that city. We're talking early 1861, 1862. He came upon Anglican missionaries who mentored him and eventually brought him to faith in Christ, where he was baptized. Fast forward, he was a teenager at that point. Fast forward, he was a lay evangelist, recognized catechist in the Anglican Church, where he was in Zimbabwe evangelizing. There was a huge amount of political turmoil going on at the time. And so an insurgency group that was rebelling against the presence of the English who were ruling the country at the time wrongly said, well, anybody connected with the Anglican Church is just a pawn of the Brits. And so they were out to kill anybody, including Bernard. He was forewarned, which is why we have the story from Nehemiah about their threatening to kill you. And what Nehemiah basically says is, bring it on. I'm not going to go hide out. And that was exactly what was true for Bernard. He was stabbed, murdered. But then what happened is, and nobody knows exactly what happened, when they went to retrieve the body was gone. And they have no idea in the world what happened to him. Stories began to spring up that he actually, God had taken his body, just like Elijah. And the site of his martyrdom is the site of an annual pilgrimage that, as we heard from Mark and from the YouTube videos, watch the YouTube videos, 10,000, 20,000 gather. But the tone of their celebrations is one of joy and sheer wonder that God would take a poverty-stricken day laborer from Johannesburg and raise him up as an evangelist, now commemorated by tens of thousands of people every year. That God would love us enough to raise up such a man. That God would love us enough to take such a man and transform him into that kind of instrument for God's love and power. That's what they are celebrating and giving thanks for. That God loved them enough to raise up such a man. Because they know, you see, that he is in that place, as the Revelation says, No pain, no grief. God wipes away every tear from their eye. And so even though he was young, I think 36 was how old when he was killed, married with children, the whole theme of what they commemorate is thanksgiving and trust, to learn from his example. One of the videos was interviewing high school students who were there, who were talking about learning from his boldness and his example, his willingness to apply himself. He wound up learning several languages in the midst of all of the training and education that he had. Just an incredibly remarkable human being. And it was out of that they were inspired to apply themselves and to live with the same diligence and courage as Christians in the midst of this developing country that they see in Bernard. I believe with all my heart that that's the right tone for celebrating people who have given their life. Wonder that God would love us enough to raise up such people and to see how he takes such an ordinary, last person you'd ever want to pay attention to human being and raise him up in such remarkable ways. And the willingness to say, oh, in the midst of what we would say, in the midst of all of my first world problems, Lord, help me not to be, as James Cone, the theologian, says, so preoccupied with the superficial that I lose courage, get preoccupied, but instead know and learn again what it is that God has planted in us, because the very same Spirit which raised Jesus from the dead not only dwells in Bernard, but it dwells in all of those who call upon the name of Christ. So today is a day for joy. Today is a day for thanksgiving. Today is a day for wonder at the beauty of God and what he can do in the life of a person who says yes. Amen.
Amen.